All right, everybody, good evening and serving it up to you live on the Buffalo Rumblings podcast and vidcast network. No Bruce Nolan this week, so you're stuck with me, Nate Geary, on another Food for Thought, a show combining two of your three favorite F words. That's right, food, football, and the third is obviously this week, fish fry. Get your mind out of the gutter. Obviously, it's fish fry, people. I have been getting berated and just used and abused on the internet in terms of my takes on never trying or wanting to try fish fry. So fish fry and getting fishy is the theme of this week's Food for Thought. I've also got a tremendous lineup scheduled for you this evening here on Food for Thought. We've got Chris Trapasso of CBS Sports going to make, I believe, his second or third appearance here on Food for Thought. We're going to talk some NFL Combine. The running backs are currently testing on the field, 40-yard dash times, all that's coming up. And I've also got Tim Graham from The Athletic in the second portion of tonight's show. Obviously, with no Bruce, I will be rolling solo, so I'll have two guests tonight to talk a little bit about, the Bills' new stadium updates, rumors this week that it was a done deal. Tim Graham started that original report earlier in the week, so we'll get his thoughts on where that progress has gone, what the potential holdups are, and what the potential details here are over the next couple of weeks. And then heading over for his next report, or his very following report, following some of the updates on the stadium, was that the Bills were interested in a potential signing of Rob Gronkowski this offseason. So we'll talk to Tim a little bit about what that means for the Bills, and ultimately how that might look and play out, and what kind of room is it? Is it the Bills wanting Rob Gronkowski more than Rob Gronkowski wanting the Bills? Is there a mutual interest? We'll find out more from our very own Tim Graham from The Athletic. Before we set the stage for tonight's show, I wanted to quickly remind everyone that Super Chats today, of course, you can post your comment in YouTube and under Super Chats. Any Super Chat that exceeds or starts at $5 is automatically getting one of these sweet, cool Genesee Brewing Company, Genesee beer pint glasses. They're very nice. I've got a whole bunch here over my, what is this? This is my over my right shoulder that we'll be giving away over the next couple of weeks. I've also got a great giveaway that we're going to be working on over the next couple of days that we'll be doing on Twitter. So make sure you're paying attention for that. And another thing to remind you, since 1878, Genesee has poured generations of brewing knowledge into each pint, can, and bottle of their beer. They make no sacrifices when it comes to their beer brewing, each with the highest quality ingredients for a consistently great drinking experience. Look for Genesee Beer, Genesee Light, Cream Ale, and their specialty line with beers like Ruby Red Kolsch and Oktoberfest. Genesee Brewing, Rochester, New York. All right, so before we get into our guest, Chris Trapasso, which will be coming up here in just a few short minutes, I wanted to go through some of what we have going on this week and on Food for Thought, and, of course, our hors d'oeuvres for this afternoon, this evening. And I'm thinking this morning because all week this week I filled in on the morning show for Howard Simon with Jeremy White and on WGR. And, early throughout one of the shows, maybe it was the Tuesday show, Jeremy was talking about fried fish or fish fry here in Buffalo, New York. And if you're from Western New York, you know how much people during Lent on Fridays love eating fish fry. Never had it. Never had fish fry, never tried fish fry, have never wanted to try fish fry. My sister, my dad, they're big fish fry eaters. Never have had the desire to eat fish fry. I think for the most part is because of the repulsive smell. I'm just not a fan of fishy smell. And I'm not much of a fan of seafood as it stands. So when you put in the fried fish aspect of this, that's really where people start to lose me. And my cousins, who, if you follow me on Twitter and you follow Food Twitter, which I'm sure you do, if you're listening to Food for Thought, there's a good chance you've got your fingers in your pulse, the fingers on the pulse of the Western New York food scene. You're following a group on Twitter called Buffalo Eats. I'm sorry, my girlfriend's Instagram feed is Buffalo Foodie, so I got that confused there for a little bit. If you're not following my girlfriend on Instagram, on her Buffalo Foodie page, please do. But Buffalo Eats on Twitter. My cousin Donnie, who started Buffalo Eats probably 100 years ago because he's old. He started Buffalo Eats, and my other cousin, Mark Goodwin, who's been on the news a couple of times when they had their bracket of, greatest Buffalo meal over the last couple of weeks. They are doing a fish fry sort of ranking, which unfortunately I have no ability to provide expert opinion on because, again, I have never tried fried fish here abroad. I've been to London, never got fish and chips because, again, it is not something at all I find appetizing. So Buffalo Eats was on Channel 4, WIVB, this evening, doing their release of the fried fish fry bracket. And of course, they throw me under the bus on TV because, like a normal person, listen, like Bruce Nolan is infamous for the classic line of like, let people like things. I am of the mind that just like we should let people like things, we should also let people hate things, which in my case is fish fry. And maybe hate is strong. And I think that's probably why a lot of people are getting on my case, because I say that I hate fish fry. JR, what's going on, my friend? Glad to have you back. To say that I hate fish fry, but never have actually tried it, I guess makes my argument about why I don't like it a little hollow. But listen, I know the things that I like. I know the things that I would enjoy, and nothing about fish fry when I go out, especially during Lent, and especially you go out to a restaurant in Western New York that serves fish fry during Lent. I mean, you walk into the restaurant and it smells like a fish market. And that is just not, to me, like an appetizing and inviting thing to smell when you're going to eat dinner. So even when I'm sort of forced to go with my girlfriend or for friends that want to go get fish fry, I'm not really into it because yeah, sure, I could go get, chicken wings. That's the worst thing you could possibly do, people, is go to a Buffalo or Western New York or anywhere during Lent that's serving fish fry and getting chicken wings or another fried substance that they're cooking in the same fryers they're cooking that fish fry in. Like, there's probably nothing less appetizing than eating a chicken wing that's been cooked in the same fryer as 100 beer battered fried fish. I mean, that is an actual nightmare situation playing out for me in real time. Like, so when people are like, hey, Nate, just we'll go out for fish fry, you can just eat whatever. That also doesn't really work for me because, again, the last thing I want to do is bite into my, hot chicken wing and have like hot fishy chicken wings. That's like the most repulsive thing I could absolutely think about. Like, there's probably nothing worse than that. So yes, I am not a fan of fried fish, and you're likely not going to convert me. So don't even try, really. I mean, people have been, for probably the last 48, 72 hours on Twitter, been trying to convince me that I've got to try fried fish. And here's a picture of this beer battered fried fish. And here's a fried fish from this place in Western New York. And hey, listen, like, I feel bad because, Big Ditch Brewing Company, who's, a great establishment downtown. I like Big Ditch for a lot of things. I love Hayburner, right? They make a fried fish, and I felt bad because everyone's kind of coming at me as I respond back to like, hey, that looks really good, but I don't want to eat it. So like, this isn't a shot at you, Big Ditch. I really love Big Ditch food. I really like Big Ditch beer. This is not a shot at your particular fish fry. It's just trash and I don't want it. So don't take offense. If you're a restaurant out there on my Twitter feed, don't take offense. It's not that I don't like you. It's not that I don't like your meals. I just don't like fish fry. And if you're serving fish fry, I'm probably going to stay away for a little while. Because again, I'm not looking to have fishy chicken wings. Who the hell would want that, by the way? So just think about that the next time you bring your non-fish fry eating friends with you. Think a little courteously. Think ahead of time. Maybe you want to go a place that doesn't just have fried food, right? Like, go a place you can go get a nice beef on weck or something that is not going to be anywhere near the fryer during Lent on Fish Fridays, because that, to me, that is just easily one of the worst things you could do from a friend perspective, is have a group of friends that are all eating fish fry and you're the lone guy that refuses to eat it, and then you're forced to eat the chicken wings out of the fish fry fryer. There's nothing worse than that. So make sure, be a good friend, be a courteous friend. Next time you're going out, make sure you know who among your group of friends is not the fish fry eater, and make sure you're bringing them to a spot that that fits everyone in the group, especially us non-fish fry eaters. All right, that takes me to our very first guest of our show tonight. And if you didn't know this, we have just two guests. We've got Chris Trapasso, who's joining us here on the Genesee Brewing Company hotline. Chris, good evening to you. Sorry to pull you away from the running back 40 times. I'm happy that I'm away from it right now, Chris, because Kyron Williams just ran a 4.72 on his first 40. So I'm hoping that score gets better, but I think I'll stay away until I know for sure.
No, thanks for having me, Nate. It's been, even these first two nights, a pretty long marathon to watch all of these guys run over and over and do the on-field drills. I like to see the combine like from afar afterward, like looking at a Google sheet that has all the numbers. But in terms of literally watching the combine, I can see how a lot of football fans get excited, watch the first 30 minutes, and then turn it off because it is kind of boring and it's a really long event.
Smart of the NFL to make sure the quarterbacks go early in this so that you can get
And
that out of the
receivers
way.
too
And the
last night.
receivers and quarterbacks. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. And just a reminder that our guests on the Genesee Brewing Company hotline are brought to you by, you guessed it, Genesee Brewing Company. Looking for Springbok in stores and bars and restaurants today. Genesee beer, brewed for generations. All right, Chris, so let's hop in to the combine and let's do what every show, every podcast is going to do. And I'd like to hear some of your winners and losers from yesterday. We'll talk a little bit about some of the guys we saw on the offensive line today as well. But let's talk about yesterday, because yesterday was sort of a historic day, Chris. 8 wide receivers testing at sub 4.4 in this wide receiver class. Chris, have we seen a draft class of wide receivers with this level of athleticism?
No, we haven't. The closest, especially most recently, the 2019 draft class that had DK Metcalf, Andy Isabella, Terry McLaurin, Paris Campbell from Ohio State, Emmanuel Hall, Missouri, Johnny Dixon, I think was right around there too, another Ohio State guy. So we've seen, I think, 7 in the same draft class before, but to have 8 last night was sensational. Now, I will say, not to be a Debbie Downer, a lot of those prospects that ran really fast aren't really great players. And I don't think we should move them from like 7th round picks up to 3rd round picks. We'll hear some of that speculation over the next few days right after the combine before we hit that hard reset because there's free agency. But in terms of pure speed, I think today's NFL, even though it is a high percentage throw league, get it out quick, it is also a big play, a splash play league, hitting those explosive plays down the field. I think you see most of the elite offenses, like the Bills, like the Chiefs, are very good at creating those big plays. And the easiest way to do that is not scheming it up. It's just having pure speed at the receiver spot.
So you mentioned several names from that 2019 class that tested very highly. Not all of them have been able to make an impact in the NFL. And that's sort of what I wanted to sort of remind people about, because I can't tell you how many tweets I saw of, this guy's not making it out of past 13. And all of a sudden we've got 27 wide receivers. This guy's not making it out of round 1. And listen, I know that in the moment, these testing scores, they tend to take the front row seat. But Chris, we all know that it's the interviews, it's some of the drills, it's some of the things that they're going to get from the coaches, from the scouts, from these one-on-one meetings that they're having with teams. Yesterday, when you look at the testing, though, that's what fans are seeing. How much does a guy like Chris Olave, running what he did? Obviously, his unofficial time was 4.26. He tested a little bit higher in the 4.3s, which probably makes sense coming after that. But like, all in all, how many guys actually helped themselves by running a 40 time that was maybe a little lower than you thought going into that wide receiver group yesterday, Chris?
There were certainly a few, but that's a great point that you bring up. I mean, everyone expected Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, the top 2 wide receivers from Ohio State, to run probably sub 4.3, especially when we saw Chris Olave measure in at around 6'1" and under 190 pounds. It's kind of a new age for the size and shape of wide receivers. We're not seeing these 6'4", 220, 225 types anymore. I think a lot of agents and a lot of teams are probably advising these prospects, hey, come in lighter. The whole league is getting lighter. Linebackers, safeties, wide receivers, running backs. We've seen a lot of smaller running backs tonight in Indianapolis. So I think a few helped. Tyquan Thornton from Baylor looks pretty fast on film. I don't know if he looks 4.28 fast. And what I think for a lot of these lower level guys that, like you mentioned, are now being talked about as 2nd round picks or sneak into the back part of the 1st round, I think if anything, the really impressive combine workouts just give a reason for teams to take a flyer on them late. And that's completely fine. If Tyquan Thornton, who averaged over 17 yards per catch in his freshman and sophomore seasons at Baylor, if he ran 4.50 with decent stats, not a lot of high volume production to his game, he probably doesn't get drafted. Now, because of that 4.28, he will ultimately get drafted just on that speed alone. So I think in terms of the guys that we expected, like Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, that's wasn't really anything that boosted their stock, but Danny Gray from SMU running 4.33, Alec Pierce from Cincinnati running 4.41. Like, it will help their stock, but I don't think it's going to move them up 3 or 4 rounds in late April.
And Chris, like talking about a guy like Traylon Burks, who going into this week was sort of expected to be on the higher end of a lot of those testing areas, a 33-inch vertical jump, 122 on the broad jump, and a 4.55. Those aren't necessarily numbers I think a lot of people were expecting. Do you expect those numbers in the combine to hurt him, or is what people see on film and what he did at Arkansas enough for him to still be in the conversation for wide receiver 1 in April?
I think he'll still be in the conversation. Ultimately, though, if you look back at, in terms of when we're saying wide receiver 1, we're meaning the first receiver off the board. Do I still think Traylon Burks will be the number 1 receiver on some teams' boards? Absolutely, because of what you mentioned. His film is sensational. It is what we're kind of looking for at the receiver spot. If you can't always get open, you got to be this big physical specimen after the catch. And we've realized, the NFL collectively, fans, media members, that the yards after the catch ability is not so much being Roscoe Parrish or Tavon Austin. It's being Deebo Samuel, A.J. Brown, or Traylon Burks, 6'2", 225. It's no surprise that he ran a little bit slower and didn't have the same explosiveness as some of his contemporaries in this draft class, because he's kind of a throwback type. He's sized like A.J. Brown, maybe not as explosive as A.J. Brown tested at the 2019 Combine, but he's that type of wide receiver. And to spin it to the Bills, if they want more yards after the catch in this offense, it's fun to think about a really explosive, dynamic athlete. Traylon Burks could help this offense get better after the catch more than any other receiver in this draft class, because his contact balance and power through contact are better than any of the top wideouts in this draft class.
Chris, we'll get to some quarterbacks here in a minute, but there's a couple other wide receivers I wanted to go over with you, particularly from the angle of what the Bills could potentially do. We hear the news today that the Buffalo Bills have given Cole Beasley and his representation the ability to go out and potentially find a trade partner. We know that Emmanuel Sanders is unlikely to return, and we don't know what the destiny of Isaiah McKenzie is. So that leaves what I believe to be a very strong position for the Bills going into last season. One that has not only room for maybe 1 draft pick, but potentially 2 with this draft class, considering how deep it is. Another guy that I know you've been on it from the start here, Chris, is Skye Moore out of Western Michigan. The testing numbers, I think, really did him well just in confirming the things that if you wanted to see speed on the field, you can find it on the film. And I think what you wanted to do with Moore is confirm it with numbers. And I think with a 4.41 40, he did that. Talk a little bit about what you like about Moore, what you thought of his testing numbers yesterday, and if there's a potential fit that you see for him in this Bills offense.
I think he's a fit in any offense, and he would be tremendous. I think he would be hit the ground running type of wide receiver, almost an instant star with Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs alongside him in Buffalo. It's funny that he got kind of labeled as a smaller wide receiver, but he was just under 5'9" and 195 pounds. I would urge all the viewers tonight, all your listeners on WGR, to pay attention to the height and weight of all of these prospects and consider those when you're looking at verticals, 40-yard dashes. To run 4.41 at such a compact frame was really, really impressive from Skye Moore. And anyone that's watched UB, that watches the MAC, Skye Moore was the star in that conference over the past 2 or 3 seasons. He had 94 catches this past season for the Broncos. He gets off the line of scrimmage, I think, as well as any receiver in this draft class. Routes are very sharp, good after the catch, because like Traylon Burks, just a smaller version of him, plays like a running back after the catch. And contested catches are his forte, I think. He had huge hands, over 10 inches. So he's someone probably in the second round, but don't be surprised if we start to hear some late first round buzz for him. That with the Bills right now, does it feel like they would pick Skye Moore at 25? Probably not, but depending on how free agency goes, the rest of this wide receiver class, I would not hate it. I think Skye Moore is that good. I have a late first round grade on him. Actually, I think mid first round grade. Forget that he's playing in the MAC. He has a very well-rounded skill set. And the last thing, he was a freshman All-American. He didn't just dominate at 23 or 24 years old. He wasn't a sixth-year senior that got that extra year from the COVID season. He's young. He's 21 years old and proved that from the jump in the college game, he was going to be a star. So I think Skye Moore would make a lot of sense in this offense. I think you could plug him in to that slot role and give, like we talked about earlier this week on GR, more of a dynamic down the field threat from the slot that Cole Beasley, especially this past season, was not able to give the Bills offense.
Another guy in the same breath of Treylon Burks, just in sort of how he's used in the variety and variations he's used, is Christian Watson from North Dakota State. And obviously he started making those inroads at the Senior Bowl a few weeks back, Chris, and some of the numbers that he was able to put up, a 38.5-inch vertical jump and a 4.36 40. Where does he fit in the NFL? Is this a traditional, boundary receiver? Is this a guy that you believe that's going to play in the slot? Or is this a guy that is likely going to have to try to find a role that a team can get creative with him?
More so the latter out of those options. That watching his film at North Dakota State, it was a very run-heavy offense. I saw a very linear player in that he being 6'4", having that speed that he now confirmed at the combine, running sub 4.4, jet sweeps, end arounds, go routes, post routes, maybe get him the ball on wide receiver screens. I didn't see Christian Watson, even against FCS competition, making a lot of guys miss, running through tackles. He's kind of a weaver through traffic, kind of glides on the football field, long strider, but definitely has that explosiveness. So I don't know if he can come in and be that outside receiver number 2 or number 3 for any team, or certainly the Bills. But you definitely, if you have a smart offensive coordinator, can use 6'4" with that type of explosiveness that he showed in the jumps and in the 40-yard dash. Just think he needs to be kind of used initially, at least, as more of a gadget player that can hit those big plays on jet sweeps and on end arounds in the NFL.
I know that there may not be a direct correlation with the Bills in this quarterback class, Chris, but this quarterback class has sort of been dubbed, one of the weaker ones, especially over the last couple of years, certainly at the top. But the more and more you start to bear down in this quarterback class, the more and more you see value in the late first round going into the second round. Guys that have a ceiling you believe you might be able to work towards. Who in your mind did the best or did the most for themselves, at least in the throwing portions of this of yesterday's combine practices? And we'll talk a little bit, Chris, about some of the testing scores and some of the athletic profiles. But in your mind, was it Malik Willis that really sort of set himself apart from his counterparts in this quarterback class during those throwing sessions?
Well, I mean, I would say Malik Willis probably would be the easy answer in that, yes, he did set himself apart, but most people were kind of expecting that because, like you mentioned, the rest of the quarterbacks clearly just on film did not have the same velocity and same ability to stretch the field that Malik Willis had. I think it was actually Sam Howell from North Carolina, because with the down year after being hyped as like the number 1 or number 2 quarterback, to lose all the skill position talent, the 2 running backs and the 2 receivers in last year's draft class, had a subpar season relative to the hype. I think he reminded everyone that he was a big recruit, almost committed to Florida State, flipped at the last minute to North Carolina, big time production as a freshman, great sophomore season, and he can really rip the football down the field. He's a little bit smaller. Malik Willis is only just over 6 foot. Doesn't matter for his arm strength. I think Sam Howell, around the same size, not even close to the athlete that Malik Willis is, but in terms of throwing last night, I think he reminded everyone that he probably has the second best arm talent in this draft class.
And Chris, I think the one thing that you want to look back at the 2021 season with Sam Howell and say it was a disappointment or he didn't live up to the hype. The thing that I keep taking from it is how impressed I was that he was able to sort of remake his game a year after losing 2 NFL wide receivers, where you really got to see the arm strength, the downfield accuracy. I really love the trajectory on his deep ball. He throws a very catchable, very accurately thrown deep ball, which in the NFL, in tight man coverage and the windows you're going to get down the field, that's a premium in the NFL. But to see him go from being a very minimal, I think threat on the ground to running for over 800 yards last season and still being able to throw for that just over 3,000, Chris, like I think that pivot or that maturation of having to recognize that he doesn't have those deep threats that he did the year prior to sort of remake his game and still be a threat against defenses.
Yeah, and that's huge. I think teams certainly in most cases like to see, 70% completion, 50 touchdowns in the final season. But to me, and I feel like some teams have a similar viewpoint here, that to witness a top-tier quarterback go through a less than ideal situation and still come out on the other side, not completely ruining his draft stock, not having to transfer, not getting benched. I mean, that happened to Spencer Rattler. He was benched and now he's on in a different program. It kind of shows a team, hey, what will Sam Howell look like if we don't have a perfect offensive environment around him? I always go back to Baker Mayfield in the Josh Allen draft class, that my biggest ding on Baker Mayfield was that his skill position talent and his offensive line at Oklahoma, the advantages that they provided him, he was never going to see that again once he got to the NFL. And I think even the Browns have a great offensive line. Maybe the receivers aren't great, but that's been true. The best case that he ever had scenario in terms of just all the weapons around him was at Oklahoma. So for Sam Howell to not completely just totally bomb his draft stock and still make plays with his legs, use them as a last resort like he needed to a lot, I think that will show teams that he is tough from a mental standpoint too, that he showed them, hey, even if we have a season where we're not great, where we lose some free agents, where a receiver gets hurt, I can still be decently productive. I have the traits to do that.
The last guy I want to ask you about the quarterback position, I think Kenny Pickett is an easy guy to talk about. I think he's likely going to be the second quarterback taken in this draft. Maybe you want to go Matt Corral. I think that's fine as well. I think there's a in my opinion, I like how pro-ready Pickett is when he walks into the NFL game. But the guy I want to talk to you about is Desmond Ritter, because I think he was the biggest question mark going into this draft because of the arm strength questions. Not that I thought on the field against air he was going to answer a lot of those questions, but it was good to see when he was matched up with or after guys like Carson Strong that you didn't see a real noticeable drop-off in that arm strength. His testing numbers, I think, opened some eyes. I was not expecting him to run a 5.4 or a 4.5 and a 36-inch vertical jump. What kind of athletic profile do you think Ritter, with that sort of athletic profile, is he a guy that you think is helping himself in this draft process, considering I think the thing that makes evaluators most nervous is he has the strength, the arm strength to get the ball down the field. At times, it's his lower body that hurts him.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think he's done a lot for himself at the combine. That workout was one of the better workouts that we've seen from a top quarterback prospect in actually a long time. I don't think, to your point about his lower half, I don't think that Desmond Ritter plays to that level of athleticism on the field. There were times where he looked a little robotic and almost clunky when he was trying to get away from pressure at Cincinnati. But because he was a multiple-year starter, won a ton of football games, didn't make a lot of mistakes, won some big games for a lesser program, I think people kind of went into the combine thinking, okay, this is your classic game manager. The traits aren't really through the roof, maybe second or third round. Now we know, at least in terms of timed and measured athleticism, he probably has first-round traits from that perspective. So he's definitely done a lot for his stock. I think it's not a great quarterback class, but I think people are coming around on it. And if a lot of these veterans aren't ultimately going to be on the move, like Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson, we might see 4, maybe even 5 quarterbacks go in round 1, because there are still a lot of teams that need to address that position.
Chris, thanks so much, man, for hopping on with me to talk some combine. Tell the folks if it's even like, if you can get it down to like 5 different places where they're going to be able to find you here in the next couple of days as the combine continues to chug along.
Yeah, I'm just still running the CBS Sports live blog at cbssports.com. I'll be trying to post some TikTok videos, but Twitter's usually the best spot if you want to gripe with one of my opinions or get after me about a food take that I have. But those 3 spots over the next few days and throughout draft season: TikTok, Twitter, and at cbssports.com.
Awesome, Chris. Thanks so much, man. I appreciate you. Enjoy the rest of your evening tonight, and enjoy these running back testing scores. Appreciate you, buddy.
Will do.
All right, that's Chris Trapasso there on the Genesee Brewing Company hotline. I don't waste time here on Food for Thought, and neither does my next guest. Tim, first and foremost, thanks for joining us here this evening, your second appearance on the podcast. It's just me tonight. So I figured I would have someone that was at least equally as handsome as I to come on the podcast, but no more handsome than me.
No, equal. There's no surpassing your handsomeness. And fun to be following a grinder in Chris Trapasso. That guy busts his ass. And I think it's pretty good balance to have now a floater come on and a guy who's just trying to get to retirement.
Right. Just getting from toilet to toilet is essentially, just if you can get to the next one, it's a win, right?
That's right. Although I didn't realize when I agreed to be on the show that it would be sponsored by beer.
You didn't like the joke? Was it a bad joke?
What happened here?
Oh wait, no, now I hear you. Yeah, I think there was a little bit of maybe we were being censored a bit after my bad toilet joke.
I don't know. Can you have me now?
Yeah, I got you. Can you hear me?
All right. What kind of operation are you running here?
It's a double show. Who knows?
The beer advertisement though is a bit offensive, and I'm going to have to ask you to maybe block that out or pixelate it for the time that I'm on here because I can't abide by that.
You've never been known as a guy that hitches his wagons to corporate America and or any sort of alcoholic beverage. You're more of a malt guy, which I've always appreciated. Real salts of the earth,
That's right.
Yeah.
I should have done something with this rat's nest on the top of my head before we got started, but all right, we'll soldier through.
We'll make it happen. Listen, man, as always, appreciate you. I wanted to bring you on for a couple reasons. Obviously, things are starting to come to a head on the stadium discussions and negotiations, much to your reports and reporting, and has been a long-term reporting here. It's been a long-term process. What in your mind and from your reporting, and by the way, I don't want to give away too much to the listeners out there. You're going to have to pay. By the way, I'd like to say something about people and their weird things about paywalls. Like, is this something that I guess I don't quite understand? Like, if you did your job and someone asked you to do it for free for their pleasure, I have a tough time grasping that. Now, listen, I do my job for free, so I guess I'm the true idiot here. But you feed your family with, your journalism and Tyler Dunn and his journalism and his blog and these people, they come and they say, well, paywall. What is this? Pay for your work?
Yeah, I understand the choice of not wanting to subscribe because there are ways that you can get your information in other places.
Sure.
I tend to think that it's not as good that way, that you do get what you pay for, or at least the premium is there and it's worth the subscription to The Athletic or go long with Tyler Dunn or the Buffalo News or the New York Times or whatever you want to subscribe to. It's generally worth it. But where I get a kick out of it is the need to declare as though you're fighting this righteous cause
that's right.
Hey, everybody, look at me. I refuse to pay for a product. And then this was maybe a month or so ago. I pushed back on somebody. I said something like, well, whatever. We had a good run or whatever the hell I generally would say to somebody. And he got pissy with me and said, from now on, I'm going to screen cap all of your stories and post them on my Twitter feed so people can read them for free. Because I think you're an a-hole. I'm like, oh, great. All right. So you're basically saying I'm a thief and I'm going to steal your content and I'm going to share it. I'm going to copywritten material and I'm going to give it away for free. And you're right. It's amusing to me, the hills that people will die on.
Yeah. Oh, there are some good ones. And especially on Twitter. Twitter is the hill, by the way, that people die on. That's where they go to die. But anyways, I digress. I wanted to just at least acknowledge that because I found it really weird. It's not, and it's only on like good stories. You've got a piece about the updates on the stadium, and these are things that people want to be updated about. And if everyone had the scoop, you could have it for free, but not everyone's got the scoop. So that's kind of how this goes, everybody. I wanted to get that out there. Anyways, Tim, so let's talk a little bit about these negotiations in this process. Now, I had from a little birdie going into this week that it was possible Jeremy and I on the morning show were going to be talking about the actual proposal and it being done and signed and delivered. That did not happen. What, in your estimation, are we sort of, quote, waiting on in this process?
I think it's a political delay more than anything else. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. That sounds like I just said it, something really negative. But Kathy Hochul's in a situation where she is about to be confronted with a lot of enemies, including within her own party, who may have aspirations to be the next governor of New York. This is an election year. She's going to be primaried. And then she's going to have to defeat the Republican candidate too. So she has to be very careful with who she upsets. And so there's a delicate art here. And really why it matters is because $1 billion or a $1.4 billion stadium is a massive amount of money, and it's going to her hometown. And there's a possibility that could look badly for her, as innocent as it is. Her political opponents are going to use that. And then even her political allies will use that in such a way of, something happening down in Binghamton, perhaps, or in Poughkeepsie, and saying, hey, look, I'll be happy as state senator or state assemblyman to vote your budget and without any issue. But this is something that we're going to need downstate, or this is something we need in my county. Our people need this project to go through. And so there's kind of like a shakedown element that goes along with politics too. So what she wants to do is she wants to delay this announcement so that she doesn't have to face criticism or scrutiny for as long as humanly possible. So I do believe that the deal is incredibly close to being done. That's not to say that it's as though she's sitting on it. In fact, she said today at her appearance here in Buffalo that there were some things that were still being worked out. It's not like they've just frozen it out and they're in a, running a four corners offense here, running out the clock. There's still work that needs to be done on the stadium, on the entire stadium deal, because there's a construction aspect to it. There's a lease aspect to it. But I get the impression that it is so close to being done that all it would take is saying, all right, we need to hit this deadline, that everything is pretty much in harmony among the three parties, that being the Bills, the state, and Erie County.
So I think the funny or ironic part of this is just the machine that the NFL is. It's this global multi-billion dollar business. And yet it still is sort of part of the real machine, which is the political machine, and even state politics, even going down to the county, which is what you're talking about as well, which is another portion, another phase and layer of this negotiation, Tim. But I find it really interesting. I'm not suggesting the Bills are some sort of pawn in the greater scheme of New York politics. But I don't think I'm not saying that, because it does sort of feel like, whether it wants to be posed as a political win for Kathy Hochul, or rather posturing so that it doesn't appear to at least be a loss or a negative.
Right.
I do find it really sort of precarious in a position that the Bills find themselves in, because it seems like every party understands they want it done, but It's got to be an agenda somewhere along the line.
And it's interesting too, because how is this going to be played out? And it's something that I mentioned. I did an FAQ on what happens next. And there's a belief about how this is going to be presented when it is announced. Will it be a press release? My guess is that that's what the governor's office would prefer. It's going to be like hey, we've approved this. Let's not make a big deal of this. Right. We got the budget that's about to come out. It's going to have it's going to be a 212 or 214 billion dollar budget or whatever it is. $1 billion going to the Bills is going to kind of get lost in the shuffle. If you can make the announcement close enough to, the entire thing.
Sure, because it's news here in Western New York.
Right.
It's probably not rippling downstate.
Probably not, but it could. But
Sure.
It could. So you have this omnibus bill that's just going to have a ton of stuff in it that you could probably pick apart, but it will take you a long time to really analyze the budget. It's just so massive. So that's why you want the stadium kind of slipped in there a little bit. I'm not trying to say pull a fast one, but again, this is politics. You're trying to finesse the situation. It's public relations. And so I do think that, and I guess I've just distracted myself from the point I was going to make because I had too much word salad in there. But give me your question again.
Yeah,
No. It was the presentation aspect of it. There's so many things that go into my mind when I'm talking about the stadium, and I got all my different things about what I can say, things that I know but can't say yet. Yeah. Things that I'm supposed to.
And the cosmic brownie in your head is telling you, no, not this one.
Right. Okay. So there's a belief that while the state would love to do this on the down low, or at least do it with as little fanfare as possible, that the county would love to say, deal is done, everybody. Yep. The Bills are staying, because that's a bigger deal, in terms of it's not as big of a political risk, obviously, for Mark Poloncarz to come out with a big flashy announcement as it would be for Kathy Hochul, given her situation as somebody who wasn't elected into the governor's mansion. She got it because of a scandal. She happened to be second in command, and now she needs to prove herself at the ballot box and doesn't want to give anybody any unnecessary ammunition for that purpose. So it'll be interesting. But yeah, it's that the way that this could play out is it might be a little bit of a tug of war as to how big they go with this announcement.
Yeah, I'm sure. And as someone that does generally like Mark Poloncarz, I imagine he would like this announcement like in a reenactment of like Rex and Rob Ryan on a dual tandem bike, with the New Deal in front of the stadium. Because listen, I mean, from Mark's perspective, I can appreciate the fact that a guy that has been one of the more consistent faces behind these negotiations. And what I'll say about Mark is he has had a pretty consistent level of wanting balance in this negotiation, of wanting to look out for his constituents and for the taxpayers here in Western New York and Erie County, while also recognizing that if he's considered or looked at as the roadblock in these negotiations, that can go in the opposite direction as well. I guess what we're talking here about is this very delicate juggling act and balancing act that politicians, if you're Terry and Kim Pegula, you also probably want this announced in a very certain way. I would bet that Terry and Kim are probably more on Kathy Hochul's side, because they don't likely want the details of how much the public is going to be actually ponying for this to be the news of the day. They want it to be, the Bills are here in Buffalo long term, not here's the percentage breakdown of what the county and what the state's going to be ponying up here.
Yeah, here's how much these billionaires are getting. And at a time when NFL owners and sports owners in general are not considered very popular people. They're villains. And a lot of that stems from what's going on with Daniel Snyder, the Brian Flores lawsuit against the NFL, the Broncos, the Dolphins, and the Giants. You have federal noses being stuck into the NFL's business. They don't like that. And the public does not have an appetite for giving an inch, and probably not. I don't even want to say at the moment. I think these are over time. I think people just realize how filthy business can be sometimes. And just because it's fun to watch on Sunday doesn't make the people who wear the suits especially easy to root for. But to get this big amount of money from the public at a time when it seems as though NFL owners are the type of people who like to cloak and dagger their way through life with non-disclosure agreements and payoffs. And you have, by the way, Jerry Jones back in the news, a story that he probably thought was dead and gone, is revitalized because of an investigative piece at ESPN regarding a top employee photographing Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders through a peephole. And I mean, it's just seedy stuff. And I think that, so I'm not saying that the Pegulas are in that circle, but I think from a general public standpoint, you have congressmen and congresswomen demanding hearings over what's going on with Daniel Snyder and racism in the NFL. They want investigations. They want watchdogs to be put on notice. And so, yeah, it's an interesting time for the Pegulas. And I think really the window may be shutting on this type of thing, and they might be getting in for their purposes at one of the last possible moments in sports history, because the tides are definitely turning regarding government just willingly giving sports leagues whatever they need. Thinking about baseball with antitrust, or the old blackout rules that the FCC used to allow the NFL to do to sell more tickets. There's all kinds of gifts that the government has given professional sports over the years, and politicians are getting less and less charitable and starting to actually go in the opposite direction and demand more. So it's a fascinating time in that regard.
I guess I hadn't quite considered the gravity of sort of the political environment in our country, and how the federal government differs from the state, differs from the county in terms of, what people want. And maybe you don't look anywhere closer than you do at New York State, where politics can differ. You walk to a different street corner here in New York State, and just in Erie County alone, and then you go to New York City compared to the rest of the state, and you start to paint a picture of how divisive things can be, and where we are as a country right now. I guess I hadn't fully appreciated that if this truly is one of the last publicly funded sports stadiums in, national and domestic sports, I think that will be a real interesting future for Terry and Kim in as ownership, because I just think that 5, 10, 15 years down the line, Tim, and 3 or 4 new stadiums are built, and they're all ponied up by ownership because state governments aren't going to pony up. And I think one of the things too, Tim, is this whole St. Louis lawsuit that still is just not making headlines whatsoever. And what Stan Kroenke has done really to the league and stiffing them on a lot of the millions and hundreds of millions of dollars of payments that his relocation fees to LA. Like, I just wonder 5, 10, 15 years ago, or a few years into the future, if this is one of those last ones, these last publicly funded stadiums in this market, if we come on some tough times, economic times here, Tim, I just wonder, and maybe I'm just talking from a place of anxiety, but I wonder if narratives turn on their popularity if things change in the future and we're still ponying up for it.
The future of sports, it's hard to tell, especially with technology the way it is and sports betting the way it is. The gate gets less and less important every year for the NFL with every new television deal. They've made their money. They don't need to sell tickets as much. Maybe these games start roving around. Maybe it's like the Harlem Globetrotters. The NFL's coming to your town in the year 2045 for a couple weeks. They're doing it already in Europe. They're just sending games, moving games around. And I don't think that we're necessarily going to get into where that's full time all the time. But, and also I want to clarify this too. I'm not suggesting that the Pegulas are getting in at the last possible minute.
No.
Like Indiana Jones rolling under the door and grabbing his hat,
the buzzer beater on. Yeah. I'm just trying to.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think that, and it's going to depend on the jurisdiction too. I mean, in California, public money for stadiums is virtually impossible. In other states, it's more readily available because the population isn't as pissed off about that type of thing as they are in some places. So it's not always going to be the same. And the other point I want to make too is, and this is also working in New Yorkers' favor when it comes to this deal. And if you're upset about public money going for a stadium, and I get that. I don't think that any money should be going to a stadium. I think that the Pegulas should have to pay for this out of their own pocket, but that's not how the business is run. And that's not the standard practice within the business. So I'm covering, I'm not covering this as a crusader. I'm covering this as this is what's happening, and I'm telling you what's happening. But the amount of money that would go to a Bills stadium, whatever it's going to turn out to be, it's not as though sports teams go with their hat in hand to the state every couple of years, because there's only one NFL team in the state of New York. Mm-hmm. That's the Bills. And then you have the NHL and the NBA and Major League Baseball. Well, those teams downstate are so wealthy they build their own stadiums.
Yep.
So you're not looking at, okay, well, we're building one, but it's not like Ohio, for instance, my home state, where you have the Indians get a new stadium, the Cavs get a new arena, and the Browns get a new stadium, all within a few years of each other. And then down in Cincinnati, the same thing happens. Those teams used to share a stadium, but no, we're each going to get our own stadium. Think of all the money Ohio's given to stadiums. That's 5 stadiums right there, and that's not counting whatever else.
3 decades, right?
In New York, there really is only one stadium. And how much it does mean to Western New York from a holistic standpoint in terms of pride and relevancy. And, hasn't Western New York lost enough? I'm talking about Bethlehem Steel and whatever else problems that, to lose their NFL team obviously would be a political disaster for anybody who's in office at the time. So that's my one thing just to say, I don't want the state to have to give any money, but it seems a little more palatable here in New York, believe it or not, despite all our population and what happens down, those teams can afford to build their own stadiums. So they do. Or I should say, they can get away with it. But the smaller the market, the more the public subsidy
they're going to have to rely.
Like in Cincinnati, or if anything were to ever happen in St. Louis again, or in places like Indianapolis. I mean, there aren't many stadiums that are owned by their team and were paid for by the team. I think it's 6. Everybody else has gotten some sort of public funding.
And just as a side gig here too, you mentioned sports betting in New York State and the revenue the tax revenue that should generate by year's end. And you also have to think about in 2023 when, recreational and medical cannabis is actually rolled out in the state, and to think about some of the tax dollars and tax revenue this state is going to be able to generate over the next 2 years. This maybe isn't the hit listen, in Western New York, $1.4 billion is very different than $1.4 million in Midtown Manhattan. There is just a different level of economics that go into that sort of money. So it is, to me, a really interesting in-depth conversation about how politics and sports intertwine, which has always happened, but it doesn't tend to be the forefront of news until these negotiations tend to happen and break down. But the one thing I wanted to ask you about, just from a need to know perspective for people that have been following along in these negotiations, but may not fully understand some of the details that surround it. One of the things I get asked a lot, Tim, is about what happens over the next 2 years. I believe there's a 2024 or 2025 deadline on safety in the stadium as it pertains to the upper deck, and how long the team will be able to actually have stands in the upper deck. Is there a deadline? And if so, do you believe that the negotiations are moving in a way where that won't intersect, where there's a gap, where there's a season that the Bills won't be able to have fans in that third deck, meaning they're going to have to go find somewhere else to play for a season?
I don't think that that's a concern at all. That's nothing that I've heard. And it's something that very early on in the process, I was talking to the people, various, parties involved, whether it be with the county or the Bills, all the people who've done the studies and the safety inspections and all those types of things. There is legitimate concern, obviously, with that upper deck. On both sides. And it's a massive expense because the support columns needed for that, are the structural supports for the entire stadium. And I don't want to get into an engineering discussion here because that's in over my head. But from the reporting I've done and the studies that I've seen, I don't want to use the wrong terminology or anything here on the air as I'm doing it off the top of my head. But as those studies that were done by the county, by the state, they put in a window of this. There's a structural integrity, and I'm saying this as for the sake of this discussion. I'm not paraphrasing but I am paraphrasing, but I'm not using a specific example from the documentation. But let's say that the structural integrity of that upper deck at the time the study was conducted has a lifespan of 8 to 12 years, let's say. And the study was done 7 years ago. So the belief is, but that doesn't mean to say everybody's got to be out there and nobody can sit up there in year 8. It's a loose guideline.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're going to do heavy studies on these every year, which they do. They do their safety inspections on a regular basis, and they're going to have to monitor it much more closely. But they're getting within that window where it was time to start really worrying about it. So that's the answer in a roundabout way of what you're asking there, without being able to give you any specifics. There is no ticking clock or because of OSHA or some other kind of government policy, it's not meeting such and such requirement. So by November 1st, you're not allowed to, have people sitting up there in the stands. You see it with the grain elevator that just had its wall blown out.
That's right.
How much difference of opinion there can be as to whether or not something can stand up. And
which is interesting.
Yeah. It looks like it's about ready to fall. Right. But everybody keeps saying, we got time. We got time. So it's, would I have a problem sitting in the 300 level for the next couple of years while this new stadium is being built? No. In fact, the press box is kind of in that 300 level.
Yes,
in the corner. But yeah, you're going to have faith that the county and the team and everybody involved is monitoring this to make sure there isn't a catastrophe.
Last thing I got for you, Tim, is your report earlier this week, too, about Rob Gronkowski and the Bills' interest. This is not necessarily news, Tim, because we know dating back to last year as well, the Bills had interest in signing Rob Gronkowski. I guess this time the question would be, and I'm not sure based on your reporting if we know the answer to this, but if there's a mutual interest between Rob Gronkowski and the Bills, because again, dating back to last year, this is the second offseason in a row we're hearing that interest is sort of in-house. I've never gotten the sense from Rob, I don't know him personally, that he's some sort of like, hey, before I retire, I got to win one for the Gipper. I got to win one for my hometown. That has never really struck me as like a desire of his, but he's not exactly the easiest. He's a really goofy guy, but doesn't mean he's easy to understand. Like I think he is a little bit more complex than he gives off.
Is there mutual respect based on the fact that he was borderline interested a year ago? But the reason he didn't sign with the Bills is because he wanted to keep playing with Tom Brady, and now there's no Tom Brady anymore. So he doesn't need to be tethered to TB12, and he can come home if he wants. So it's plausible. And is it probable? I don't know. I mean, I didn't write the story with any kind of wink and a nod information. Like I know, I'm trying to be cute and they're in talks or anything like that. Not the case. I also learned that and I took the line out of my story. I had mentioned in there all his family that lives in Western New York, but before I filed it to my editor, I double checked, and his brothers don't all live here anymore. I think only one of them still lives in Western New York. His dad is in the New England area. He's got brothers in Dallas. His mom's down in Florida. So I think they still have their house that he grew up in, and they all stay there when they're in town, and they're here often. But but it's got to be an attractive situation for him to be able to play the Patriots twice, to be able to play with a quarterback like Josh Allen. If he wants to keep playing, he's got a ton of friends, and he still does have some family here. The whole thing. It's a position of need for the Bills, even as much as anybody might love Dawson Knox. And I thought he had a great season, a breakout season. Rob Gronkowski's numbers were better than that. And wouldn't you want two of them? I think if I'm a coach, I'd want two of them. And Rob Gronkowski's a hell of a blocker. The great thing about Rob Gronkowski, what makes him so great for an offense, isn't necessarily his statistical production in receiving. It's the fact that when he's on the field, you don't know what's coming. And the Bills in their history have been it's been unfortunate for them. They've always had tight ends who did one thing and not two things. It was Lee Smith or, it was Charles Clay or, it was always, you couldn't put somebody out there and now you can. Scott Chandler, another one. But now with a guy like Rob Gronkowski, the defense sees him out there, and they don't automatically say, "Well, here's a pass coming."
Yeah, right.
Here's a run coming. No, there's a versatility there that I think is very attractive to the Bills.
I I guess I can't really let you leave before I ask you about Ty Dunn's piece, because it sort of dropped while Jeremy and I were on air, and we're sort of like reading that thing you do when you've been in radio, you know how this goes, where like your co-host is reading a line and then you're trying to go a little bit below that so that you can sort of speed read through a long piece.
You're teaming up on it.
Yeah, that's right. So we were kind of doing that together this morning, and I found myself, much like a lot of Ty Dunn pieces, sort of glued to the page, wanting more. And I think that's probably the premise of his piece, which is this desire to feel like people want answers and want more, and they're not getting it from Sean McDermott. But this isn't new, his shtick, the media shtick, and kind of what he gives, but more importantly, what he doesn't give to the media. I guess I was a little surprised at some of the fan backlash and feeling like nobody really feels like they can criticize Sean McDermott in a game where I think a lot of people want to criticize someone, but they're just not really interested in criticizing Sean.
I think and in talking about this a lot with football people, I was at the combine all week and talking with coaches who may or may not still work for the Bills or ever worked for the Bills. I'm just saying, talking to football people who have opinions on this, educated opinions on this, agents, players, people directly connected with the Bills. I think that the fans are pushing back on asking Sean about these questions. Number one, you want to stick up for your guy, and Sean has a lot of fans in Western New York. Hey, leave him alone. Same mentality as, whether you're upset with Jerry Sullivan and what he asked Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, whatever, same mentality. Just leave our team alone. Let them get their job done. There's nothing you can do about it now. But I also think that there's a cognitive dissonance involved. It hurts so bad, I think, for fans of how that game ended. And it's not necessarily that they don't want to know. They don't want to keep being reminded of it. Stop asking him. He's not going to tell you. Well, I think that they wouldn't say stop asking him if they started telling me, because then at least you're getting a payoff. You're getting information. But to keep asking so it's not that necessarily that they don't want to know. I think it's they don't want to just be reminded that it exists. And unless we're going to get some productive answers, stop asking. So
I think that's been his stance, though, right? Is that I'm not giving that answer, so you can stop asking.
That's
but
right.
They haven't stopped asking,
and we won't. And there's reasons for that. When Tyler Bass meets with the press the next time, he's going to be asked about it. We haven't talked to Tyler Bass about it. The first time the new special teams coordinator, who was Heath Farwell's assistant, is made available for his introductory news conference, he's going to be asked about it. Leslie Frazier, the first time he's made available, he's going to be asked about it. And not just the first time, multiple times. And you pick any player on the defense who was on the field at the time, they're going to be asked about it. Saran Neal was asked about it. Obviously, he was on the kickoff unit, but Saran Neal is not on my list of people I need to know what happened in the last 13 seconds for. There's 20 others, and we're all going to have a chance to talk to those 20 others. So they're going to be asked. You're going to hear about it from guys after they've left. Maybe then they're going to start talking. Maybe Heath Farwell at his first news conference in Jacksonville says something about it. I don't know, but it's not going away, and it's not going away any faster than Wide Right went away. This is an all-time Buffalo sports moment. It is no goal, 13 seconds, you name it. It's part of the Buffalo sports identity forever now. The pretending that it's not there isn't going to make it go away.
But do you think it's too simple to say, had he addressed it in the numerous times he could have addressed it and just gave some detail and said, whether or not what Tyler has from a player or from a source, whether or not that's the entire thing, and it's probably part of it, but it's not the whole thing. There is a lot of failure in 13 seconds, which is why people like me and like you, the reason we're looking for those answers, because there isn't just, hey, this is my fault. Well, what is your fault? Because there is a laundry list of issues that go into that sort of failure. And is it as simple as just saying, had he addressed it, we wouldn't be asking these questions? I think part of me wants to believe it, but I think the cynic in me also believes we would just know who to yell at.
I don't. Well, I'll just answer it with how I think it would play out. which is exactly what you're asking me. But if Sean McDermott had talked about it at the year-end news conference on locker cleanout day, we wouldn't have asked him about it this week at the combine. We wouldn't have asked him about it, unless he said something like heads will roll and heads hadn't rolled.
Right.
Then we'd follow up and say, hey, you said this. How come this hasn't come to pass? But no, we wouldn't have asked about it. That'd be the end of it. We'd probably ask Tyler Bass the next time we had a chance to talk to him, but we wouldn't be trying to ask everybody on the roster. We'd have our answer.
Well, man, I won't keep you any longer, although I feel like we probably could do it for 2 or 3 more hours. There's just lots to talk about. It's a good time of the year, considering it's March. I'm still freezing my ass off, and I'm not playing golf. So I appreciate you, my friend. I'm sure you've got more work down the line. Anything you want to promo that you've got that you're working on?
No, not really. I'm kind of on watch for a couple of things. Got one feature idea that I'm kind of just holding on to because it doesn't have a timeliness to it. I can really kind of publish it whenever I want. But I don't want to give that away because I think it's a pretty easy idea. I don't want anybody else to do it first.
Okay, you can tell me when we go to Elmo's and you can buy me some wings and tell me.
Oh yeah, I'll tell you everybody I interviewed. I'll tell you the whole thing.
See that,
I just don't want to declare it.
That's the perks of being me, I guess. Well, thanks, buddy. I appreciate you. Enjoy your evening, your Friday
night,
your weekend.
Lest anyone think that I'm going to tell you who my anonymous sources are. This is a story in which the people who I interview are going to be quoted as saying such. But yeah, it's not. I don't want anybody to think that off the air. I go around telling other people.
Very professional, Tim Graham. Yeah, no one's ever thought that you're the kind of guy that's giving up sources. So don't you worry. I look like the kind of guy that gives up sources. So don't you not so much. So don't worry about it, my friend. I appreciate you. And we'll do that
anytime.
Soon. We'll grab some wings and some beer very soon, my friend.
Anytime.
Appreciate you. Tim Graham there of The Athletic joining us here on the Genesee Brewing Company hotline. And of course, we appreciate Tim and all of his knowledge and his updates on that stadium situation that's playing out right now in Orchard Park. And again, that Tim Graham appearance is brought to you by Genesee Brewing Company, and all of our guests on the Genesee Brewing Hotline are brought to you by Genesee Springbok, Genesee's current rotating seasonal specialty beer. Genesee Springbok is Genesee's take on centuries-old German style, brewed every year since 1951. Genesee Springbok is a full-flavored lager with a mild malty finish. Well, what a run we had tonight. Thanks to all those that tuned in. We'll have this up in podcast form very shortly. Before I end things, I, of course, have to get to my winners and my losers from this week because, listen, it's it's combine week. So that means all of us know there's got to be some winners and losers. And my winner this week, of course, is going to be Josh Allen. Josh Allen is kind of the winner every week. But the reason Josh Allen's my winner this week is that every wide receiver that a Bills media member was at the combine interviewing this week, what was the question? Well, if you were to play in Buffalo, would you be excited to play with Josh Allen? Everybody and their mother wants to play with Josh Allen. Anybody that catches a football for a living wants to play with Josh Allen. So I think Josh Allen this week, his name got mentioned more times during those quarterback drills. Oh, look at Malik Willis throw that deep ball. It's not quite as zippy as Josh Allen's arm, but man, he's close to Josh Allen. So Josh Allen, my big winner from Combine Week, even though he's probably in like Boca or he's in the Baltic or he's somewhere beautiful with his girlfriend enjoying some well-deserved R&R in his offseason. My loser this week, how could it not be Carson Wentz? How could Carson Wentz not be my loser this week across the NFL? His general manager comes out and basically says, I had to have a conversation with Carson before we came down here to prepare him for me basically, airing out our dirty laundry, saying we don't really believe in him as our franchise quarterback moving forward. Even Frank Reich, who sort of mentioned that he stuck his neck out for him, followed up saying, well, of course, I love Carson. I stuck my neck out there for him. But yeah, I have no idea if he's going to be playing here. If he's playing here, great. If not, I don't know. So Carson Wentz, my biggest loser across the NFL during Combine Week because his franchise just hanging him out to dry for the second year in a row. Second different franchise in 2 consecutive years, leaving Carson Wentz out to dry. And the worst part is if you're Carson Wentz, but if you're the Colts and you're Chris Ballard and you're Frank Reich, I'd be careful throwing this quarterback out to the wolves. He's probably got to be your quarterback next year. What options do the Indianapolis Colts have? They have no first-round pick because they traded it last year for Carson Wentz. They don't have a first-round pick to go out and get into conversation with Houston about Deshaun Watson whenever that situation becomes, relevant again and an actual move is impending for Deshaun Watson. They're not going to be able to get in that conversation. Will it happen before the draft? Probably not anyways. So maybe Indianapolis will get in the hunt for a guy like Deshaun Watson, but are the Texans going to trade him in division? I would be highly, highly skeptical that the Houston Texans, listen, they're not the smartest franchise. If they go ahead and trade their franchise quarterback, even with all of the gray clouds sort of hanging over him, to a division opponent that will be playing him twice a year, that seems like absolute football suicide. I'm going to go ahead and say that the Colts have no chance for Deshaun Watson. Who does that leave them? Are they going to go get Jameis Winston? Are you going to trade for Jimmy Garoppolo? Is Jimmy Garoppolo a notable, is he notably better than Carson Wentz? I'm not sure that he is. So the Colts are in such a precarious position to be going out and floating out the things that they are about Carson Wentz. It's not as much as to say the Colts should be going out there giving a vote of confidence to their quarterback and talking about how they can't wait to get Carson Wentz in year 2 of the system. In year 2, and it was injuries or it was, year 1 in the system is always hard to pick it up. We're really excited about Carson in year 2. We're talking about what the future holds here in Indianapolis, and maybe we'll bring a guy in to push and compete with Carson for that number 1 spot. No, we don't know if we'll be here. We've got plans, and we're not sure if he's part of those plans. I just think that's a really unique strategy from a franchise that really doesn't have a lot of other options at the moment to get better than Carson Wentz. So, yeah, I feel a little bad for Carson Wentz. He kind of seems perpetually picked on, and is a player that if you rewind to 2015 before the injury in their Super Bowl year, obviously Nick Foles takes over, they win a Super Bowl, and I think that has always sort of hung over Carson Wentz. But Carson Wentz was well on his way to an MVP in 2015, and he has just not. I mean, injuries have really, injuries play a bigger impact with quarterbacks than I think a lot of people like to believe. You look at Robert Griffin III, who's at the combine mentoring the young quarterbacks on the field, and you forget that it really wasn't that long ago that he was the number 2 pick and was a guy that in his rookie season brought the Washington football team to a playoff berth only to get hurt. And his career was never the same after that ACL injury. So, and Carson Wentz has had a laundry list of even more severe injuries, neck and back injuries and knees, and he sprained both ankles this year. So, yeah, I don't know. It looks like it's the end for Carson Wentz, Indianapolis. I don't know where the hell they're going to go. So, all right. Well, anyways, folks, that's going to do it for me. Nate Geary riding solo this week on Food for Thought. We'll have Bruce Nolan back next week. We've got a great group of upcoming guests for our shows. I've got a giveaway item, a great little a gift pack from Genesee Brewing Company. Also, we've got these Genesee glass pint glasses. I've got literally 6 boxes of these bad boys. So over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be giving these Genesee pint glasses away, courtesy of Genesee Brewing Company, our core sponsor here at Food for Thought, and we're looking forward to do that over the next couple of weeks. So we hope that you won't be leaving hungry here on another edition of Food for Thought. We appreciate you hopping along here tonight with our guests Chris Trapasso and Tim Graham. I'm Nate Geary. This is Food for Thought.